In the early hours of March 13th, 1964, a young woman named Kenny Genovese was walking home to her apartment in the Queens area of New York. It's a safe neighborhood, not many problems have ever been reported, but on this morning in her Queens neighborhood, when Kitty was walking home, unbeknownst to her as she approached her building, there was a man hiding with a weapon in his hand. And undoubtedly, probably because there are a lot of you at home and kids are probably watching, I'm not going to get into what happened, but she clung to life because of her injury, crying out for almost 30 minutes for her neighbors on both sides of the street to come out and help her. No one came. And as investigators combed the area looking for witnesses, they found at least, the newspaper reported 37 people looked out the window and saw this. But the reality was the number was closer to 12. And based on that, prompted by this terrible story that was in the news, psychologists studied this and later called this phenomenon the bystander effect, which basically found the greater the number of people who are at an incident, the less likely it is that anyone will do something about it. So if something happens to you, you want to pray that 1, 2, or 3 people are near you and not a whole group of people, because if there's a whole group of people, no one will do anything. And nowhere was this more the case than with King Ahab in 873 BC. Real picture. And so he was the king of the northern tribe of Israel. And we are told that Ahab made an Asherah pole and did more to arouse the anger of the Lord than the God of Israel, than all the kings before him. And so we're in this series called To Topple a King. And we've been talking about how there are different kings in our lives. And last week we talked about the king of political mind control and how we as Christians need to see through when Democrats, Republicans, independents use our religion, they appeal to our religion, to Christianity, to get us to do something for the sake of Jesus, but that we're really appealing to us to get to do something for them. That this happens all the time and we need to see through this. But today, the king that we want to topple is the king of DIY Christianity. How many of you like DIYing around your house? Right? You like fixing stuff up and you follow DIY accounts and that sort of thing. DIY Christianity is someone that takes what they like out of the Bible. They take a little bit of that, what they like and what they understand, and they add in a thought leader and common sense and a book they read and a little bit from Oprah and grandma and what they think and they learned in school. And they turn it into this big soup. They mix it all together, but then they label it with the label Christianity. That is DIY Christianity. I want to read to you some statements I've heard from Christians in the last year. Exact statements. Here we go. Hey, what's your zodiac sign? Anybody know what their zodiac sign is, right? Man, I guess it was just fate. He's a Hindu, but that's okay. All religions lead to heaven. My psychic said, I prayed to Mary for help with my family situation. I asked St. Anthony to help me find my lost keys. The universe is really trying to tell me something right now. I've been manifesting positive energy for this situation. Karma will take care of it. I don't need to worry. Go to the next one. I believe Jesus was a great teacher like Buddha and Muhammad. Truth is personal. Everyone has their own path. I feel more connected to God when I practice yoga and chant ancient mantras. This podcast has really helped me understand the negative psychic energy I've been allowing into my life. Prayer works just like manifestation. It's all about speaking what you want into existence. God won't judge anyone. He just wants us to be happy and true to ourselves. And then the Bible is inspiring, but I get just as much out of Eckhart Tolle's teachings. Heard these exact phrases from Christians. The problem with all of these is that they are deeply contradicting the teachings of Jesus. And the problem is, most Christians don't know the Bible, therefore they don't know that it's wrong. Listen to what Jesus said about these kinds of sayings and these kind of beliefs. Watch out for false prophets. They'll come to you in sheep's clothing. In other words, it's innocent. There's nothing wrong with it. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they're ferocious wolves. See to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy, the Apostle Paul said, which depends on human tradition and the elementary spiritual forces of this world rather than on Christ. What does this have to do with Ahab? And what does this have to do with us? 1 Kings 16:31 says this. Ahab married Jezebel. You heard the name Jezebel before? Married Jezebel. She was a daughter of the king in Sidon, which was a pagan country north of Israel. And Ahab, who was the king of Israel, supposed to serve God only, began to serve Baal and worship him. He set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal that he built in Samaria. You remember the story from John chapter 4 when Jesus is walking through Samaria and they're like, we're told that we ought to worship here. It goes back to this. Ahab also made an Asherah pole and did more to arouse the anger of the Lord, the God of Israel, than all the kings of Israel before him. Now, what in the world are we talking about? This is a Baal. This is a little statue of a Canaanite deity named Baal. Baal, or Baal, for our purposes in English, I want you to imagine there's a rod of lightning coming out of his hand. He is the god of rain and fertility. So if you're a farmer and Yahweh is not answering your prayers, to sort of hedge your bets, you bring into your house one of these guys. And that happened a lot. And the other thing was, this guy's getting some on the side with his chick named Asherah. They're a pair together. Asherah was a pole that was made out of a tree. That's why we don't see any statues today. An Asherah pole was always a tree that was on the top of a mountain. And up at the top of the mountain, there would be a guy, because you don't have print in 800 BC, who would go and carve the shape of a woman out of a sapling. This is ancient pornography. An Asherah pole was in the shape of a woman, and then Asherah prostitutes would go to the top of the mountain and they would have sex with people. Why? Here's why. Baal's the god of rain. Asherah is the goddess of fertility. If 2,800 years ago, you're a farmer and you have just enough money to buy seed, you put it in the ground, but there's a drought and there's not enough to cover the crops, what's going to happen is you're going to have to go get a loan to buy seed for the next season. And if you don't get enough seed then, you're going to lose your land. Your whole family is going to be out on their nose. So what do? If you're a farmer, you go up to the high place, you have sex with a temple prostitute. What's that going to do for you? You're going to have sex with an Asherah prostitute, and that sort of magical power from Asherah is then going to come down so that when you consummate your relationship with your spouse, the magical power of Asherah is going to go into your spouse. It's nuts, right? But hey, you think it's kind of scary right now having a baby in 2025? Imagine 300 years ago. Imagine 3,000 years ago. So there was a major temptation for people that were following Jesus, not to stop following Yahweh, but to sort of bring in a little side piece, Baal and Asherah, just to cover your bet. Because if Yahweh doesn't come through for you, maybe the others will. Now, why is this a problem? It's a problem because when God created the people of God, led them out of Egypt, what did he say in the 10 Commandments? I am the Lord your God who led you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. Number 1, you shall have no other gods before me. Number 2, you shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven, above, or the earth below. Number 3, if we're losing at halftime, you stay in your seat. We need consistency, people. I am very superstitious when it comes to the games. We stay in our seat the rest of the game. Does that mean you can't go to the bathroom? Yes, you stay if we're behind. Anyway, all right, so what God is describing here is there are lots of gods you can follow, but I saved you, and we are now going to have what is called in the Bible a covenant relationship. A covenant relationship is you are going to agree to terms. This is how this relationship is going to work. And what God's people said is, yeah, we'll agree to your terms, but we're also going to have a relationship that looks like this. I'll follow you, but I also have a side piece theologically. Now, what we have to realize is that God is a relational God. And what we often think is this big universal deity that's impersonal and that sort of thing. Talk to anybody that's ever been cheated on, and they'll tell you what God feels like. The pain that he feels because of the exclusivity of the covenant that we made together has been broken because you've gone to other gods. Now, so many Christians have turned over parts of their lives without realizing it, opening up doors to spiritual influences in a negative way without even realizing it. And this is probably what was happening with most of the people except for Ahab. Now, why does this keep happening today? It goes back to this, the bystander effect. The greater number of people are doing it, if all my friends and family, everybody online's doing it, then yeah, it must not be that bad. It's the bystander effect. So this is how it works with God. Usually is there's a bunch of people that do something, and then God raises up one person. And that's what happened with Elijah. Elijah now comes into this story for the very first time. 1 Kings 17 says, now Elijah the Tishbite from Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, as the Lord God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain or any rain in the next few years, except at my word. I want you to notice first his name. His name is Elijah. My question to you is, what does your name mean? Lean over to the person next to you and tell them, my name is this and my name means this. Go ahead, do that real fast. What does your name mean? Today, names really don't mean anything. I was told that my name, Brian, means strength. My sister would say Brian is he who has lots of gas. You know, today names really don't mean anything. But if you went back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago, there weren't that many names. So what they would do is they would give you a common name. Jacob, James, essentially the book of James. Jacob and Joshua, very similar. Like in a family, you might have, you know how George Foreman, the boxer, had 5 sons and he named them all George? And we make fun of that, right? Named them all George. But in Jesus' time, especially at this time, they would pretty much all have the same names, but they would give a unique name to them that would be some sort of meaningful characteristic. Elijah means, from the Hebrew, El and Yahweh, Elijah means, my God is Yahweh. So is there any question where his allegiance stands? Right? My God is Yahweh. I just want to put it out there, right? That's my name, right? Now, he also comes from a town called Tishbe. Tishbe is in the hill country of Judea, which is just stunning, but no one lives there because it's so hard to get to. And so the story is like, we would like now to introduce my God is Yahweh, who is from the town of Podunksville. And the story is this. It is tantamount to say, what's like a remote place that we say in the United States? Like it's Hicksville, something like that. There is a guy who has a word from the Lord, and so he drives to Washington, D.C., walks straight into the White House, and says to the president, I have a word from the Lord for you. That's what the story's saying. Elijah from Hicksville went straight up to the king, not knowing anything about his backstory. And he confronts King Ahab. And he said, as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years except at my word. It is going to be a complete famine. Here's my question to you. What was going through Ahab's mind when he heard that? Like, famine was an attack against who or what? Who did Ahab worship? Baal. Baal was in charge of the rain. And so when this no-name guy comes into Ahab and says, it's not going to rain for 3 years, except at my word, Ahab did what? He laughed. It's like, even if that did happen, all I have to do is pray to Baal, and Baal's going to make it rain, right? It's just funny. Get this guy out of here. You got to be lucky I'm not killing you right now. Now, Baal and Asherah are the gods of fertility. Ahab knew that he could trust them. And basically, Elijah was saying, I'm going to prove to you that these idols that you're following are false, they're not real, they don't work. Have you ever noticed someone who really prides themselves? I'm deconstructing my faith and I want to prove that you're wrong and you're superstitious in your beliefs. Or people who mix their own DIY version of Christianity together, and they're like really fervently trying to prove that you're wrong. In the end, have you ever noticed it never works out for them? That's because the great devotional writer Oswald Chambers says, false gods offer empty wells. There's one God. You don't get to make your own God. You don't get to DIY them and put them together, and I'm going to pick and choose what I want. There is one, and he sets the terms. So in chapter 18, verse 1, after a long time, in the 3rd year, 3 years go by, Ahab is furious. He's sending his army in every direction to find Elijah and whack him. We need to end this drought. I need to find Elijah. He's going crazy to find Elijah. 3 years into this drought, it says, the word of the Lord came to Elijah, go present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land. So Elijah went to present his case to Ahab. Now, do you remember last week how we talked about every person has a story, and every person typically at times will play 3 different characters? We will play the hero, where if we see a challenge, we'll rise up and overcome it. We'll play a victim. And we'll say, in this particular area of my life, I can't really do anything. We'll play a victim, woe is me. And then the victims usually turn into villains that will turn around and will hurt people in that area of their pain. What is the first thing Ahab said when Elijah went to him? It says this, Ahab went to meet Elijah, and when he saw Elijah, he said to him, is that you troubler of Israel? He blame shifted. You're the one. And Elijah's like, I'm not the one. I've not made trouble for you, Israel, Elijah replied, but you and your family's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's command and you have followed the Baals. You've created this DIY version of Christianity. And so he puts a challenge to them. I want you as the king. How many people live in the Philadelphia metro area? You include the Jersey counties and over here in northern Delaware, probably about 5 million, right? In all of Palestine, where Ahab was king, about 1.5 million to 2 billion people. He said, if you command them, they will come because you have the army and you'll kill them. He said, I want you to command the people, summon them to meet me at a place called Mount Carmel. And he's like, okay. I want you to have them meet me at Mount Carmel. 2 million people then assemble at the base of Mount Carmel. What's the biggest crowd you've ever been a part of? Remember in, 2017, the Eagles won the Super Bowl? Did everybody go down to Center City? Yeah, a lot, right? Tons of people. Imagine that crowd there, and Elijah goes to the top, and he's surrounded by, look at what it says. Elijah said, bring 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at her table. So he's at the top of this mountain, if you can go back. There are roughly 1,000 people up here. Up at the top of Mount Carmel, there's now a monastery, a Carmelite monastery. Have you ever heard of Carmelite nuns? Why are they called Carmelite nuns? Because of Mount Carmel. That's why they're called. See, you get all kinds of tidbits of information here. You're coming here, you're getting all. Here we go. So 1,000 people are up at the top. All these people are there. And what happens? Elijah went before the people and said, how long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. If Baal is God, follow him. Spread this out. Get the word out all the way to 2 million people. And what did the people say? The people said nothing. What is that called? The bystander effect, right? So one man at the top of this mountain, whose name is Yahweh is my God, said, here's the challenge. I am the only one left. I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left. But Baal has 450 prophets. I want you to get 2 bulls. What are they going to do? They're going to have a sacrifice. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves. Let them cut it into pieces, put it on wood, but don't set it on fire. I will prepare the other bull, put it on wood. I'm not going to set that one on fire. And then you call on the name of your God. I'll call on the name of the Lord Yahweh. And the God who answers by fire, he is God. And then he asked the people, what do you say about that? And the people said, what you say is good. That seems pretty clear. All right, so we're going to have a showdown here. Prophets of Baal, Elijah. And so you see these prophets of Baal crying out to God, praying to Baal and Asherah, please light this thing on fire. Elijah said to the prophets, choose one of the bulls, prepare it. So they took the bulls, prepared it. They called on Baal from morning till noon. Have you ever been somewhere where you're standing at a concert for 5 hours? For 5 hours, they're waiting for Baal to send fire from heaven to consume this. No response. No one answered. And then they dance around the altar that they had made, crying, weeping. 2 million people surrounding this mountain. And at noon, Elijah, because he was a good Philadelphia sports fan, started taunting him. I love what it says in the original Hebrew. It says, Elijah began to taunt them. Shout louder, he said. Surely he is a God, perhaps in deep thought or busy. The word busy in Hebrew is the Hebrew word for going to the bathroom. Maybe he's in the bathroom, give him about 10 minutes, right? Just hang in there, just keep at it, right? Maybe he's traveling, maybe he's sleeping and he must be awakened. I love this. Prophets of Baal were thinking, this better work or we're gonna lose our jobs. So they shouted louder, and then what did they do? To show their commitment to Baal, they slashed themselves with swords and spears, blood flowing. Midday passed. They continued their prophesying for 9 hours, but no response. No one answered them. No one paid attention. And so Elijah said to the people, if you can bring the picture up again, Elijah said to the 2 million people, I need everybody to come up here. Everybody, just cram in. So they all crammed up this mountainside, up to the top, crammed in with the 1,000 people that are already there. Everyone is squeezing in. Elijah's saying, I do not want anybody to miss this. They came to him and he repaired the altar, which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had said, your name shall be Israel. And with the stones, he built an altar in the name of the Lord. He dug a trench around it, large enough to hold 50 pounds of seed. He arranged the wood and cut the bull into pieces and laid it on the wood. And then he said to them, fill 4 jars with water and pour it on the offering and wood. Why? Why is he doing that? Like, I don't want you to think I'm doing a trick here. I want you to douse this entire place. And then he said, do it again. And they did it again. And then he said, do it a third time. And they did it the third time. The water ran down the altar and filled the trench. And at the time of the sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed. Yahweh, Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and I am your servant, and have done all of these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, so these people will know that you are God, that you are turning their hearts back again. And then the fire of the Lord fell, burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the soil, licked up the water in the trench. And when all the people saw this, they were no longer unable to speak. They fell prostrate on their faces and cried out, the Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. And that is the historical story of Elijah on Mount Carmel. But it doesn't end there. Then Elijah turned to the people. You've seen what has happened here. Seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let anyone get away. Grab them all. And Elijah said, take them down to the Kishon Valley, the Kidron Valley. Over here is Nazareth, where Jesus was to be born. And in that valley, they slaughtered every single one of the false prophets. Today, for our time of communion, we are going to have our own Mount Carmel moment. When you came in on the seats, there were cards and pens on the seats. And I want everyone right now, I want you to take that card and pen in your hand. I'm going to have you write down 3 things. And the first thing that I want you to write down is I want you to write down the false beliefs, distractions, or compromises that you have allowed to coexist with your faith in Jesus. I want you to think about the things that you've said, the things that you've done, the things that you've believed, the doors that you have allowed to remain open that have adulterated your relationship with God, that where you have broken, even unwittingly, knowing that covenant relationship with God you have broken. Write down those things now. Second, I want you to write down the name of a person, a book, a show, a podcast. Well, I can't say a TikTok account anymore, an Instagram account, a piece of media that has been negatively influencing you to follow other gods. Write that down. Third, I want you to write down the actions that you are going to take based on what God is speaking to you right now. The thing that you're going to eliminate from your phone, the show you're going to eliminate, the person that you're going to cut off, the step that you're going to take. And then finally, I want you to pray and I want you to write down the name of a person that you're praying for, that has been influenced, that is in pain. What we're going to do is fire in the biblical story always represents judgment, but it also represents cleansing. And the story of Elijah is not just about judgment, but it's about a second chance. We know that the Bible tells us in 1 John that if when we ask God for forgiveness, we can know that he hears us, that he listens and he cleanses us and purifies us from all unrighteousness. God wants to have people that are fully his. So what I want you to do is I want you to take your card and I want you to fold it. And then there are 4 tables up here in the front. What I want you to do is, here's my promise to you, no one's going to see these cards. We're going to burn these later this week. You have my word. Fold the card, and I want you to take it, and you're going to put it in the little box. And then I want you to take the communion. The card that you're presenting is the offering, the sacrifice, the cleansing, the door you're shutting, the person you're putting before God, the situation that you're putting before God. And then you're going to take the Lord's Supper, and you're going to take it, and you're going to go back to your seat. You're going to ask God to speak to you. God, show me ways in my life where I have let windows and doors open for influences other than you. You just sit and reflect in the Lord's presence. And after everyone has been served, then we'll take the Lord's Supper together.
Thanks for watching today's message. Make sure to check out Brian's new book, Finding Favor, God's Blessings Beyond Health, Wealth, and Happiness. To sign up for Brian's newsletter, please go to Brian's website at brianjones.com.